Coming up, turmoil in the Middle East. Protests turn deadly in Libya and across the region. A live report straight ahead. And we have an exclusive interview with a former State Department senior official on what comes next.
And later, Facebook adds new relationship options that will affect same-sex couples. But not all gay rights activists are happy about it. We have the details. District Wire News starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Kelsey Duggan.
And I'm Victoria Rinkevičiūtė. From Egypt to Libya, the Middle East has seen pro-democracy demonstrations and violence for weeks. Jeremy Borden is live here in the studio with more. Jeremy?
Egypt's protests forced the end of that country's oppressive regime. It inspired thousands in the region, with protests in Bahrain, Libya, Yemen, and other countries fighting for democracy. Libya, though, is among the countries turning increasingly violent. Libya is the latest site of pro-democracy demonstrations turned violent. They say they want an end to the 42-year rule of Libyan ruler Muammar Gaddafi. But his son promised a difficult struggle.
Forget about democracy, forget about reform. We will go into a fierce violence that will be worse than Iraq, worse than Yugoslavia. It will be a fierce civil war.
Protesters say they're not going to back down.
About my own safety, but right now my safety is not on the stake because Libya is on the stake, and Libya is much important than my safety right now.
Protests and violence continue across the region. In Bahrain, demonstrations went on with sometimes tragic results. And according to some reports, Algerian protesters faced thousands of police in a widespread crackdown. Each country faces its own unique struggles, but there are similarities.
Tunisia is not Egypt, Egypt is not Algeria, Algeria is not Libya. But there are what I call three shared similarities. You have autocratic, oppressive governments that have been in power for years. You have failed economies and dismal economic and social conditions. You also have the third element, very important, the rising expectations of a new generation.
Demonstrators in Egypt, the envy of the freedom movement at the moment, voiced support for democracy across the region. Many at the Libyan embassy in Washington also voiced their support, as others feel the effects of the Middle East crisis in rising gas prices across the United States. With violence on the rise in both North Africa and the Middle East, those in the region say the future is anyone's guess. Jeremy Borden, District Wire News. To shed more light on these recent events, we have with us Hilary Mann Leverett. She teaches here at American University and also at Yale, and she's a former State Department official. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start first in Libya, some of those images that we've seen. As someone who's worked and lived extensively in the region, what's your reaction to what's going on in Libya?
It's happening very quickly, and it seems pretty decisively. The people realize that they could stand up at this moment in time and are doing so. Many of the other powers, particularly the United States, seem to really not be able to do anything about it. And it will have a huge impact on U.S. policy, on U.S. interests in the region. We will see, I think, Libya, Bahrain, Yemen potentially really change their governments in some fundamental ways, in ways that we may be surprised. They're not going to turn out to be secular, pro-American democracies the way that we would perhaps hope or expect them to be. They're going to be important Islamist parties that come into power for the first time, and it's going to be critically important that the United States get these right.
And how can we get it right? What should America be doing in the region?
Well, we have to really be open to, not afraid of, the rising influence and empowerment of different segments of society, including Islamists. We've gotten this wrong so many times in Iran in 1979, when Hamas came into power in Gaza in 2006, when Hezbollah came into power in Lebanon. We've gotten this wrong throughout the region. We have to be able to deal with Islamists, say that it's fine that they're in government, we're not going to pick winners or losers, and take it from there.
Well, how do we do that, given that our interests are so opposed, especially vis-a-vis Israel?
This is the fundamental problem. U.S. interests in the Middle East for years have been to protect the free flow of oil to Western markets at a good price and the safety and protection of the State of Israel. Those two, oil and Israel, are not popular in the Middle East. We're going to need to figure out a way to protect the basic part of our interests in a way that is not offensive to populations throughout the Middle East. That is going to be the challenge for the Obama administration. And if precedent proves to be any predictor of the future, we're really in for some tough times.
Let's turn quickly to Egypt. What happens now in a post-Mubarak world there?
Well, we know it's going to go somewhere from Mubarak forward since he stepped down. The question is, how much further from Mubarakism will the state go? And here again, it's going to be critically important that segments of society, including the Muslim Brotherhood, including the Islamists, have a say in the way the state is run, and especially in the foreign policies. The United States has to be very careful here not to try to pick who we're going to deal with or who we're not going to deal with, because instead of isolating them, we will end up being the party isolated.
But can you really blame the Obama administration and the State Department for trying to do that, given some of the more radical elements of these Islamists?
Well, it's a little bit hard to say. You know, Islamic governance in Gaza, Islamic governance under Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Islamic governance even inside the Islamic Republic of Iran, though it's very politically incorrect to say here in Washington, those governing systems are at least they belong to their people. So with all of their flaws, all of their warts, they belong to their people, and they have a certain amount of legitimacy that we need to come to terms with.
Let's talk about you've spent a lot of time in Iran. Let's talk a little bit about Iran. What, in your mind, you know, that was the place that this was supposed to happen first. Where did we see this wrong?
Well, I think the conventional wisdom, the hopes of many in the Obama administration and among commentators was that this was going to happen in Iran in 2009. I was one of the very few people in 2009, after the re-election of Ahmadinejad, to say, no, there's not going to be another revolution in Iran like that. They had their revolution, and the Islamic Republic that was produced from it, with warts and all, is the Iranian people's. People who even want it to evolve will do it through reform, not through basic revolution. This is still something that is not accepted in Washington, and we continue to be in denial at our own peril.
Well, let's hope, or I'm sure the State Department hopes that we get it right this time. Professor, thanks so much for being with us. And Kelsey, we'll go back to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. 4 American hostages taken captive by Somali pirates are dead today. The pirates hijacked the boat on Friday, holding the Americans captive. U.S. forces had been following the pirated boat, but when they boarded it today, they found all 4 hostages had been shot by the pirates. U.S. forces tried to save some of the victims, but all eventually died.
American citizen Raymond Davis continues to sit in prison in Pakistan today, accused of shooting 2 men in Lahore. U.S. officials say Davis killed the men in self-defense, but Pakistani officials say he was spying for the U.S. and the men were following him. Protests in Lahore over the shooting continue today, while the relationship between the 2 countries remains strained. U.S. officials say Davis cannot be held because diplomats in foreign countries have immunity.
At least 65 people are dead after an earthquake toppled buildings in one of New Zealand's largest cities. The 6.3 magnitude earthquake struck Christchurch, New Zealand, during Tuesday's lunchtime rush. It brought down buildings, broke water lines, shut down most of the city's power, and even ripped apart the iconic Christchurch Cathedral. Rescue crews worked into the night looking for people trapped beneath the rubble. This is the second major quake to hit the city in the last 5 months.
Millions of government workers may be sitting at home in March. If the Republicans and Democrats can't agree on a budget, the government will shut down. Annie Stevens has more.
Will run out of money on March 4th unless Republicans and Democrats can agree on the national budget. Both parties say that cuts are necessary, but they disagree on the how, when, and where. Congress is out of session this week, but when they return on Monday, they will have only a few days to work something out. And American University professor Beryl Radin says an agreement is in everyone's best interest.
You really have to negotiate. We've got a system with all these different players, and if people would just say, I'm not going to talk to you, then it just collapses, and the consequences are really very great.
Many in Congress say they do not want to see a shutdown, but they are still pushing for their way.
We do not have a government shutdown, but we must have reductions that are very, very substantial, and the Senate must have an opportunity to act upon them as well as the House.
Democrats worry that a large, sudden cut in spending would hurt economic recovery. The president proposed a $3.7 trillion budget for 2012. Republicans say that spending is too high. They passed a $61 billion cut in the proposed budget last week. Many Democrats say Republicans are holding a hard line on negotiating and are being unreasonable.
The way to do this like adults is not to say it's my way or no way, but rather sit down and negotiate. No Democrat has said, let's use shutdown to get what we want. Many Republicans have.
Experts say it's likely that Congress will resolve this by passing a temporary funding measure. This would push the deadline back about 2 weeks and give the government some money to work with in the meantime. For District Wire News, I'm Annie Stevens.
Union leaders in Wisconsin are urging people to go back to work while protests continue in the state's capital. Protests started when Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker proposed cutting union bargaining rights and benefits. His proposed plan would double health care premiums in an effort to control the state's $3.6 billion deficit. The protests have spread to other states too, including Ohio, Nevada, and Tennessee.
D.C. taxpayers are not paying for one but two fully loaded SUVs. City Council Chairman Kwame Brown ordered a luxury Lincoln Navigator in November. When it arrived with the wrong color interior, he simply ordered another one. Now taxpayers are responsible for a $4,000 monthly lease. Brown says he was not aware of how much the payment would cost and is looking into returning one of the cars.
Just days after record-breaking temperatures, a mix of snow, sleet, and freezing rain falls into the district. AU crews worked overtime clearing paths and chopping ice. Crews say they were worried about students and their safety and wanted to get an early start.
We're up at 5 and we were out here at 5:30. We wanted to really have everything clear and safe for walking for the students by 7. That was our goal. And I think we got most of the main areas clean, but there was a lot of ice.
Although crews laid salt over walkways and roads, they're urging students to be aware of black ice and steer clear of unplowed areas.
Some big academic changes are coming up to American University. It's the first major overhaul to academic regulations in 25 years. Kristen Rudman is live in the studio to tell us more. Kristen?
An American University Faculty Senate Committee is suggesting making changes to academic standards, and it could make a big difference to students.
Proposals are being made to possibly change the academic regulations for students. Various standards will be assessed, such as limiting pass and fail courses, restructuring freshman forgiveness, and creating higher standards for the Dean's List. Janelle Clothier, director of AU Central, describes the potential academic changes.
There's going to be a look at what constitutes graduating with Latin honors. Right now there are, I think 50% of the undergraduate students graduate with Latin honors, and there's a proposal that will up the GPA to be more in line with the students that are performing at the highest levels.
Some students agree with the challenge of achieving higher academic standards.
Students would definitely be upset if one semester they have a 3.5 and then they would have to change their academics standards a little bit just to work a little bit harder. But in the end, I think it's a benefit for the students. There's nothing wrong with working a little bit harder in the classroom.
Other students disagree as they think classes are difficult enough.
I think it's actually kind of ridiculous. It's very difficult to do right now, and only very good students to achieve a 3.5, especially in this climate. A lot of classes here are really difficult. School communication, business classes are very difficult, and it's very hard to even get B's in most of them, especially major classes.
Proposals to the American University academic regulations are to be reviewed soon.
The Senate is supposed to vote sometime this week on the recommendations. For District Wire News, I'm Kristen Rudman. Back to you, Kelsey.
Thanks, Kristen. The proposed expansion of the Homeland Security's Nebraska Avenue complex near AU has some neighbors worried. They say the plan will cause some traffic problems. The layout will double the size of the current building but cut some of its parking. The on-site transportation coordinator promises to listen to concerns and boost employee carpool options. He also says construction won't begin until 2016.
Ward 2 ANC commissioners will discuss issues facing EU students at a town hall meeting tonight. Commissioners Darren Jones and Tom Smith will talk about their work and then open up for questions. The commissioners represent EU students and commonly make decisions regarding zoning the EU campus plan and other neighborhood issues. The town hall meeting is at 7 p.m. in Ward Building 2 on Americans campus.
Coming up after the break, a victory for gay rights. We'll tell you about the new options on Facebook for same-sex couples. Gay activists say it's a long time coming. A full report after the break.
And you can say bye-bye to petting animals at this National Zoo. District parents are upset because a popular exhibit at the zoo is shutting down.